Imagine a nation forged in the fires of revolution and built on the promise of liberty, now teetering on the edge of self-destruction. How did the United States, a beacon of hope for so many, find itself on a collision course with the deadliest conflict in its history? This isn't just a story of battles and dates. It's the story of a nation at war with its own soul. Join us as we explore the turbulent 15 years that pushed America to the brink, the road to the Civil War. Our story begins in 1845, a period of explosive growth and ambition. The United States was a young, confident nation, driven by the idea of manifest destiny, the belief that it was destined to stretch from coast to coast. This dream rapidly became reality. First came the annexation of Texas, a vast territory with deep roots in slavery. Then, the Mexican-American War erupted, a conflict that ended with America acquiring an enormous swath of land, including what would become California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. On the surface, this was a moment of triumph. The nation had nearly doubled in size. But beneath the celebrations, a poisonous question began to fester. Would these new lands be free, or would they be slave? This wasn't a new debate, but westward expansion gave it a terrifying new urgency. For decades, the North and South had maintained a fragile balance of power in Congress. Every time a new state joined the Union, it really shook things up. Right. The North, with its burgeoning industrial economy, increasingly saw slavery not just as a moral stain, but as an economic system that suppressed free labor and wages. Abolitionist movements gained momentum, their cries for justice growing louder and more insistent. In the South, however, the economy was inextricably linked to slavery. Cotton was king, and enslaved labor was the engine of its agricultural empire. To Southerners, Northern interference wasn't just a threat to their economy. It was an attack on their way of life, their property, and their constitutional rights. The moral argument against slavery was transformed into a fierce political and economic war, where every piece of new land became a pawn in a high-stakes game for the nation's future. By 1850, the tensions had reached a fever pitch. The nation was a powder keg, and it needed only a spark to explode. In an effort to defuse the crisis, a group of political giants, led by Senator Henry Clay, crafted a series of laws known as the Compromise of 1850. It was a desperate attempt to please everyone, but in trying to do so, it ultimately pleased no one. For the North, California was admitted to the Union as a free state, a major victory that tilted the Senate balance. But this came at a bitter price, the Fugitive Slave Act. This law was draconian. It compelled citizens in free states, under penalty of law, to assist in the capture and return of people who had escaped from slavery. It denied the accused the right to a jury trial. For many Northerners, this was an intolerable violation of their conscience and their state's rights. It brought the brutality of slavery directly to their doorsteps, turning ordinary citizens into unwilling participants in the slave system. Outrage swept across the North, and resistance to the law, including the growth of the Underground Railroad, intensified dramatically. For the South, the compromise offered the principle of popular sovereignty for the new territories of Utah and New Mexico. This meant the settlers in those territories could vote for themselves whether to allow slavery. It sounded democratic, but it was a political gamble that effectively outsourced the nation's most divisive issue to the frontier. The Compromise of 1850 was hailed as a final settlement, a great pacification. President Millard Fillmore declared it a solution that would heal the nation's wounds. But this peace was an illusion. It was merely a temporary truce, a brief, shallow breath before the plunge. The deep, fundamental divisions hadn't been resolved. They had only been papered over, and their cracks were already starting to show. The fragile peace shattered just 4 years later, with the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, championed by Senator Stephen Douglas of Illinois. This law applied the principle of popular sovereignty to the territories of Kansas and Nebraska. The problem: these lands were north of the line established by the Missouri Compromise of 1820. which had banned slavery in that region for over 3 decades. The act effectively repealed that long-standing agreement, throwing the question of slavery wide open in the heart of the continent. The result was chaos. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers flooded into Kansas, each side determined to claim the territory for their cause. What followed was not a peaceful democratic process, but a brutal, small-scale civil war. Pro-slavery border ruffians from Missouri clashed with abolitionist free staters. Towns were sacked, elections were rigged, and blood was spilled on the prairie. This violent period became known as Bleeding Kansas, a terrifying preview of the national conflict to come. It proved that compromise was failing and that Americans were now willing to kill each other over the future of slavery. Then, in 1857, the Supreme Court dropped a bombshell that shook the nation to its core. The case was Dred Scott v. Sanford. Dred Scott was an enslaved man who had been taken by his owner to live in free states and territories. He sued for his freedom, arguing that his time on free soil made him a free man. The court's decision was devastating. Chief Justice Roger Taney, writing for the majority, declared that African Americans, whether enslaved or free, were not and could never be citizens of the United States. He argued they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. Furthermore, the court ruled that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional, stating that Congress had no power to ban slavery in the territories. The Dred Scott decision was a stunning victory for the South, appearing to give slaveholders the right to take their human property anywhere in the country. For the North, it was an outrage. It invalidated the entire platform of the newly formed Republican Party, which was founded on the principle of stopping slavery's expansion. The ruling didn't settle the issue. It poured gasoline on the fire, pushing the two sides further apart than ever before. In this era of profound crisis, a few powerful voices rose to define the struggle. There was Abraham Lincoln, a lawyer from Illinois. Initially a moderate, Lincoln was passionately against the expansion of slavery. His eloquent debates against Stephen Douglas launched him onto the national stage, where he warned that a house divided against itself cannot stand. He argued the nation could not endure permanently half slave and half free. Opposing him was Stephen Douglas, the Little Giant. Douglas championed popular sovereignty, believing it was the most democratic solution. He didn't see slavery as a moral issue, but as a political one best left to local settlers to decide. Then there was John Brown, a radical abolitionist who believed that slavery was a sin so profound that only violence could end it. After his bloody campaign in Kansas, he led a raid on the federal armory at Harper's Ferry, hoping to spark a massive slave rebellion. Though he failed and was executed for treason, he became a martyr for the abolitionist cause in the North and a terrifying symbol of Northern aggression to the South. And we must not forget the voice of Frederick Douglass, a man who had escaped slavery to become one of the most powerful orators and writers of his time. His first-hand accounts of slavery's cruelty and his unwavering demand for freedom and equality gave the abolitionist movement its most powerful moral authority. These figures were not just politicians or activists. They were the living embodiments of the nation's fractured ideologies. The final, decisive break came with the presidential election of 1860. The Democratic Party, unable to agree on a single candidate, split into northern and southern factions. This division paved the way for the Republican candidate, Abraham Lincoln, to win the presidency. Lincoln won without carrying a single southern state. His name didn't even appear on the ballot in 10 of them. For the South, his election was the ultimate catastrophe. They saw him as a radical abolitionist who would destroy their way of life. They believed the federal government was now in the hands of a hostile, purely sectional party that would trample their rights. The time for compromise, they declared, was over. In December 1860, South Carolina became the first state to secede from the Union. Within months, 6 other states followed, forming the Confederate States of America. The United States, a nation born from a declaration of unity, was now fundamentally broken. The turbulent road, marked by angry debates, Violent clashes and failed compromises had reached its end. The nation stood on the precipice of war, a war that would test whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, could long endure. The storm had finally arrived. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey through history compelling, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next episode, where we dive into the opening shots of the Civil War.